It will go to the Texas Senate, which is considering it. More states need to do this. My home state of Georgia, my native state of Louisiana, they should be on the list for constitutional carry. You should not have to have a permit to conceal carry if you are a lawful person who lawfully bought a firearm. So good on Texas. Now the Texas Senate has to do it. Now, I'm actually sitting here as we begin writing. You know, you can always subscribe to my daily newsletter. If you text the word data to 33777, you can go subscribe. You don't have to pay anything. It is, well, if you want the good stuff, you got to pay $7 a month. For the general stuff, you don't. And I'm about to send a general piece out. And you are more than welcome to get it if you text the word data to 33777. You get, or you can always go to ErickEricksonShow.com or EWErickson.com to get stuff as well. But so I've been thinking about this Russia story. I don't know if you've heard. Remember the story that the Russians were paying bounties for killing American servicemen. It blew up against Donald Trump. Kamala Harris attacked him over it. The left attacked him over it. The intelligence community made the claims. Now Joe Biden is going to, he's going to take the business to Vladimir Putin with sanctions, and it turns out that the Russian bounty story is not true. This is the headline from the Wall Street Journal this morning. Intelligence was limited that Russia offered bounties on U.S. troops, White House says. That would be the Biden White House. The Biden administration Thursday says it didn't have solid intelligence that Russia had offered bounties to Afghan militants to kill U.S. troops. Reports that last summer shook up U.S.-Russia relations, increased tensions between the U.S. and Taliban during a troop drawdown, and prompted bipartisan condemnation over the Trump administration's inaction. On Thursday, the Biden administration said U.S. intelligence had only low to moderate confidence in the reports of the alleged bounty program. The administration expressly declined to link the latest sanctions and expulsions of Russian diplomats undertaken Thursday to the bounty program. But enlisting the bounty as a point of tension with Russia alongside the SolarWinds hack of government and corporate computer systems interference in election actions U.S. intelligence officials attribute to Moscow, the administration aimed to put Moscow on notice and to protect U.S. troops remaining in Afghanistan until the withdrawal is completed. Last year, the Wall Street Journal and a hell of a lot of others reported that a Russian spy unit paid members of Afghanistan's Taliban movement to conduct lethal attacks on U.S. troops in that country, citing a classified American intelligence assessment. The alleged bounties were first reported by the New York Times. Of course, it was the New York Times that first reported this. Turns out they don't really believe with it. The U.S. spy agencies disagree on the strength of the intelligence. The Marine Corps general in charge of U.S. operations in the Middle East and Afghanistan said there was no evidence. The proposed payment scheme resulted in U.S. troop deaths. All right. They used this against Donald Trump on the campaign trail. Is there any remorse at all about this?
I would say first that we felt the reports were enough of a cause of concern that we wanted our intelligence community to look into those reports as a part of this overall assessment. They assessed with low to moderate confidence, as you alluded to, that Russian intelligence officers sought to encourage Taliban attacks against U.S. and coalition personnel in Afghanistan. The reason that they have low to moderate confidence in this judgment is in part because it relies on detainee reporting and due to the challenging environment and also due to the challenging operating environment in Afghanistan. So it's challenging to gather this intelligence and this data. I will say that we assess, our intelligence community, I should say, assesses that a Staff Main Intelligence Directorate, GRU, also known as, manage interaction with individuals in Afghan criminal networks. We have high confidence in that assessment, and the involvement of this GRU's unit is consistent with Russia's encouraging attacks against U.S. and coalition personnel in Afghanistan. So while there's low to moderate assessment of these reports, we felt it was important for our intelligence community to look into it. And we, of course, will not stand by and accept the targeting of our personnel by any elements, including a foreign state actor. This information really puts the burden on Russia and the Russian government to explain their engagement here. Go ahead.
Jen, given that assessment, does the president have any regrets for how many times he attacked President Trump on the campaign about this issue for not taking action related to the Russian bounties?
Well, I'm not going to speak to the previous administration, but I will say that we had enough concern about these reports and about the targeting of our men and women serving, the men and women who are proudly serving around the world, that we wanted our intelligence community to look into it. Now, again, there are several factors that contributed to the low to moderate confidence in the judgment, including the difficulty of the operating environment and, of course, the reliance on detainee reporting. At the same time, we still feel there are questions to be answered by the Russian government.
So they don't want to. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to talk about Donald Trump. They don't want to engage in the harm. They don't want to engage in the slights. They don't want to engage in anything related to thereto. But my goodness, they'll walk it back now because it's not a point of contention in the Biden administration steps against Russia. Headline, Kamala Harris pushed unverified story about Russian bounty on U.S. troops in the Middle East. Democratic vice presidential nominee, this is from October 7th. Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris claimed during Wednesday night's vice presidential debate that President Donald Trump ignored alleged Russian bounties on American troops, despite several generals and intelligence officials saying there is no evidence corroborating the claim. There was public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers, Harris said. And you know what a bounty is? Someone puts a price on your head. They will pay it if you're killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that. Now, let's go back to the New York Times report. Headline, Russia secretly offered Afghan militants bounties to kill U.S. troops, intelligence says. Charlie Savage, Eric Schmidt, and Michael Schwartz. Eric Schmidt, no relation to the Google guy. American intelligence officials have concluded that a Russian military intelligence unit secretly offered bounties to Taliban-linked militants for killing coalition forces in Afghanistan amid peace talks. The United States concluded months ago that the Russian unit, which has been linked to assassination attempts and other covert operations in Europe, intended to destabilize the West or take revenge on turncoats. Islamic militants or armed criminal elements closely associated with them are believed to have collected some bounty money, the officials said. The intelligence findings were briefed to President Trump, and the White House's National Security Council discussed the problem at an interagency meeting in late March, the officials said. Officials developed a menu of potential options. An operation to incentivize the killing of Americans or other NATO troops would be a significant and provocative escalation of what American and Afghan officials have said is Russian support for the Taliban, and it would be the first time the Russian spy unit was known to have orchestrated attacks on Western troops. All of this is this was written as fact. It was written as fact that President Trump was briefed. It was written as fact the National Security Council discussed it. It was written as fact that it happened. It was written as fact that there were conclusions. It was written as fact that the intelligence community said as much, and it was not true. Even the Biden administration is no longer willing to say it's true. Even the Biden administration says they can't stand by the claim, but the New York Times did. The New York Times did. It was a hit job on Donald Trump by the American media. And now the White House walks it back. Now, why was it walked back? Because Joe Biden is imposing sanctions on Russia for hacking into the United States, for the Solar Winds hack, which is actually a really big deal. Interestingly enough, the media has not reported all of the details on it like they did this. The Solar Winds attack is a big freaking deal. Essentially, what was happening is computer code was altered on a program used to secure American computers. The code was hacked into and altered that allowed the Russians to get deeply within the American intelligence community servers because they were using this outside software to protect themselves. And it had been hacked. In fact, the reason we're not hearing so much about the Solar Wind story is because the American government is pretty freaking worried about what the Russians got, and they don't want to signal anything within the press because the press won't be able to help themselves and will report it. Joe Biden imposing sanctions now on Russia.
My bottom line is this. Where there's an interest in the United States to work with Russia, we should and we will. Where Russia seeks to violate the interests of the United States, we will respond. We'll always stand in defense of our country, our institutions, our people, and our allies. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. President, did President Putin give you any indication in that call that he is willing to change his behavior?
We indicated we would talk about it. I laid out, as I said, very simply. I said during the campaign, I said when he called to congratulate me on being elected, I said subsequent to that, this last conversation, that if it turned out that he was engaged in the activities that he'd been accused of in cybersecurity and solar winds and interfering in our elections, that I would respond in kind. I urged him to respond appropriately, not to exceed it, because we can move as well. My hope and expectation is we'll be able to work out a modus vivendi, but it's important that we have direct talks and that we continue to be in contact with one another.
That's what he wants. Sanctions. He's going to impose them. And by the way, there's good reason to impose more sanctions on the Russians. But one of the reasons should have been the Russian bounty program. After all, Kamala Harris attacked Donald Trump. Kamala Harris attacked him for not taking harsh action against the Russians. So it was a natural question. If these are the reasons why not the bounty program? Why isn't it listed? Well, they had to walk it back now. It also begged other questions about the level of the sanctions and what they were going to do. Why? Because otherwise they would walk it back. They would have to explain why they're not using it, why the sanctions aren't more severe. So finally, now that Trump is gone, they can do it. The question is, who in the intelligence community was seeding this information? Remember, it was a guy embedded now at the CIA who worked in the White House who started the Ukraine stuff to get President Trump impeached the first time. I'm not really down with the whole deep state conspiracy stuff, but let's be clear here. There are former Obama aides and other leftists within the intelligence community who wanted to hurt Donald Trump. They wanted to hurt him. They wanted to prove you can't take on the intelligence community. It might be time to do a full deep dive into the intelligence community and find out who the leakers are and purge them, because clearly they themselves are trying to play at nation state games, and they shouldn't be doing it. They were trying to disrupt an American election. Our own. There's got to be some level of accountability there, but I bet the press is going to rush forward, unencumbered and unburdened, to even inquire as to who the New York Times sources were, because it got them what they wanted. It helped defeat Donald Trump.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be on the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. James O'Keefe has been banned from Twitter, the head of Project Veritas. Have you seen his reporting on the CNN guy? Let me get to his website here as I'm doing this. It's a pretty damning report that he's got right now. This is from the New York Post. Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe's Twitter account was suspended Thursday, a day after he released secretly recorded video of a CNN staffer boasting that his network produced propaganda, his words, propaganda, the CNN producer, propaganda aimed at defeating Donald Trump during the 2020 election. Twitter gave no reason for the suspension, and a message on the account link said only it was disabled due to a violation of Twitter rules. CNN technical director Charlie Chester was featured in the undercover video on Wednesday, saying that the network brought in medical experts to over-dramatize Trump's coronavirus health issues. The admissions were taped during a fake Tinder date in which Chester boasted the network got Trump out of office. Look what we did. We got Trump out. I'm 100% going to say it, and I 100% believe that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out, Chester said, adding that he came to work at CNN because he wanted to be a part of that. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was. Chester also bragged in the Sting tape that the network played up the COVID-19 death toll for ratings on orders from top CNN brass. Both Twitter and Facebook took extraordinary censorship measures against the Post in October 2020 after the exposés about Hunter Biden's emails, which Twitter baselessly charged that hacking materials were used. This CNN story, so this guy, if you haven't heard the details, a Project Veritas worker working for James O'Keefe, found a CNN dude advertising on the dating site Tinder, went on dates with him, and secretly recorded the conversations. He was very, very braggadocious about his behavior and antics. He was very, very braggadocious about CNN being used. Now, given CNN's ratings, I don't know how much of an impact you can say they had on getting Donald Trump out, but you can tell that the coverage was relentless. I know people, I worked at CNN for 3 years. I've still got a lot of friends there. I got a lot of respect for a number of the people who work there, but it's very, very clear that CNN decided to become MSNBC light. Less smart. They got Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, not exactly paragons of intelligence. And for all of their slamming of Fox News and MSNBC as left and right commentary and CNN, what's an apple? When's an apple and not a banana? We only speak truth. It's very clear CNN decided to go all in on sensational attacks against Donald Trump. Every single story had to be about Donald Trump. They gave Valerie Jarrett's daughter a job. In fact, they booted a CNN anchor to make space for Valerie Jarrett's daughter, Valerie Jarrett of the Obama White House. And I know multiple people who currently work in the building at CNN who tell me they themselves tired of the fact that every story had to have a negative Trump angle. Every story had to be tied to Donald Trump to get airtime, and you could see that in their coverage. Now that Trump is gone, the network's ratings are in decline.
30. And,
of course, they're just attacking James O'Keefe. They're not actually attacking what their producer said. He's the technical director for CNN, Charlie Chester. You should pay attention to this story. It's not going to get a lot of media coverage. It's very clear at this point. The media is circling the wagons to protect themselves. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I have a piece that I just pushed out to my Substack, and I want to spend a few moments talking about this. If you want to get it, I'll make it easy. Just text data to 33777. The third link will be to my newsletter. You should subscribe anyway, but nonetheless, I want to just meditate with you momentarily on the nonsense in the press. Bear with me here. The New York Post published a story about Hunter Biden last year. In the run-up to the election, the New York Post recounted that Hunter Biden had this laptop. There's all sorts of damaging information on it. There are pictures of him with the prostitutes and the crack, and on it went. Twitter blocked the New York Post account, and Twitter ultimately blocked the New York Post. Twitter got mad at and punished anyone who tried to share the story from the New York Post, and it turns out the story was true. But that didn't matter at the time. Twitter came up with all sorts of excuses, and it turns out that the story was completely true. Social media giants routinely allow you to put up pictures of celebrity homes. Celebrity buys a mansion, there's a big story. Celebrity buys mansion in Malibu, here are the pictures. Or on Mulholland Drive, there's a big picture of the mansion. Or in Bel Air, well, conservatives put up the picture of a celebrity buying a home in Topanga Canyon outside Los Angeles, a multi-million-dollar home, along with the pictures of the other purchases the celebrity made, and suddenly their accounts are turned off or the tweets are deleted. Facebook won't let you share it. What is it? It's the Black Lives Matters co-founder. The self-described Marxist co-founder of Black Lives Matters bought a $1 million-plus house in an all-white enclave of Los Angeles, and anyone who dared say so on social media got their accounts turned off. You can do it about J-Lo and A-Rod, but not about anybody else. When their properties are divvied up, people will be able to put pictures on it, and it'll be just fine. But not the Black Lives Matter co-founder. Oh, no, you can't. In Georgia, Latham Sadler has announced he's running against the media darling Raphael Warnock, the U.S. Senator. Latham Sadler is going to be one of probably a dozen candidates running. He's a Navy SEAL, worked for the Trump administration, left to become an executive at Synovus, the bank. Young guy announces his launch, and Twitter restricts his account. Says there was just a lot of activity on his account, so that they had to restrict it. He's running for the United States Senate. Of course there's a lot of activity. The media, through social media, put out a ton of falsehoods about Georgia's voter law. They're doing the same with Texas's proposal now. Lies about restrictions on voter ID, lies about restrictions on absentee ballots, lies about restrictions on early voting. Raphael Warnock, Georgia's new senator, sent out an email push making false claims. They've given him a pass. Social media's given him a pass. Social media's given them all passes about all the information they wanted to put up on social media that was not true. The media ridiculed Donald Trump for saying the Russia bounty was a hoax. The Washington Post gave him 4 Pinocchios for saying it was a hoax. Turns out it was a hoax. Various reporters who reported it at the time today, their tweets are still up. Twitter has not appended their tweets to say it's misleading information. But by God, if a conservative were to put up information about the Biden administration that might not be true, there would be a little notice from Twitter. You put something up on COVID-19 that the Dr. Fauci doesn't like, they're going to flag it for you. 60 Minutes gets to continue its account. Unlike the New York Post with a truthful story on Hunter Biden, 60 Minutes outright defamed Publix, the grocery store, and Ron DeSantis, and they get their media accounts left intact. 60 Minutes, I think, is on its 5th or 6th explanation for why it did what it did, including selectively editing Ron DeSantis to merge the audio of two separate questions and make it sound like Ron DeSantis was responding to just one question. It was an outright distortion. You put up a clip of Joe Biden that was like that, and Twitter's going to put a little label on there that the video could have been edited, or they may even take it down. But this one, nope, they were perfectly fine to let 60 Minutes keep it up. In fact, speaking of Ron DeSantis, he put up a video, it was on YouTube, of him discussing with scientists different precautions and procedures for COVID and reopening of schools. The scientists were citing European data and what European scientists are advising European nations, which is quite a lot different than what some of them are advising in this country, including Dr. Fauci. YouTube took the video down. The science isn't settled. The science is not settled on this. And in fact, the scientists in Europe disagree with the scientists in the United States. Ron DeSantis was highlighting what the Europeans are doing. YouTube banned the video because someone in this administration here probably didn't like it, went against their advice. Didn't go against scientific consensus because there's a disagreement. And on it goes. The original New York Times reporting on the Russian bounty program was done by Charlie Savage, Eric Schmidt, and Michael Schwartz. There was no doubting in their reporting. They treated it as confirmed. They treated it as collaborated. They treated it as corroborated. They treated it as dealt with by the Trump administration internally and covered up, and it turns out it wasn't true. There's no appendage on the New York Times reporting today. I've looked. There's no editorial notice that the Biden administration disagrees with it. There's nothing. You got a lot of conservatives who believe the deep state was out to get Donald Trump. This will add fuel to the fire. But what's more important for all of us to understand is that the American media and the American left, which the media is part of, so internalized their belief that Donald Trump was an authoritarian tyrant who must be stopped, they will engage in all the behaviors they claimed he engaged in to stop him and his supporters. They claimed he was a liar. They'll elevate their own lies and mistruths. They'll embrace heavy-handed censorship. The bastions of free speech are opposed to the free speech of those they disagree with because they want to stop all the people they view as a menace. They have become the thing they claim to hate. They've convinced themselves it's for our own good. They know what's best for you and me. We're just the Hicks and Rubes of the Bible Belt. We're conservative. We supported Trump. We must not know reality. They got to protect us from ourselves, or we're bigots and racist and we need to be stopped. They're happy to lie themselves. They're happy to harm those they see as less committed to liberalism than themselves and less noble than themselves. They're happy to engage in cancel culture. Remember CNN sending the reporter to harass the guy for putting up the video of Nancy Pelosi, or they sent the reporter down to Florida to the retiree's house because she shared something on Facebook. Oh my God, she shared something on Facebook. It turned out to be Russian propaganda. She had no idea, and yet they wanted to name and shame her in her front yard. They never apologized. On a daily basis, they are obsessed with Fox News. Obsessed with Fox. Tucker Carlson, you would think, is the second coming of Donald Trump. If not Ron DeSantis is, they can't decide who. But every day there's a story about what did Tucker Carlson say last night? How dare he? They're upset, and they call him a liar because you can go to Fox News at any time of day and get counter-programming from the left-wing cultural zeitgeist of CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and the Washington Post. You can go to Fox News and get the rest of the story. You can go to Fox News and get the different stories. The stories the rest of the media doesn't want to tell you because they're out to get you. The problem with this is more extreme than just standard media bias. There are a growing number of Americans who know the media isn't telling us the full story, who know the media has a bias, who know the media is out to get people like you and me. There's a story on CNN about evangelicals and the virus. They're using a self-described, and that's important here, self-described evangelical church where from the pulpit the pastor talks about the virus being the mark of the beast and a tool of Satan and embedding in you and all sorts of stuff. I mean, the guy can be self-described evangelical, but that doesn't necessarily make him evangelical. They'll find that they'll nutpick. Instead of nitpick, they nutpick. They find the one fringe guy and use that one fringe guy as an example of all of them. Oh, look, all the evangelicals believe Microsoft is injecting microchips in you with the Moderna vaccine. They frame stories. They don't just tell you the truth. They frame stories, and then they use social media, and social media bullies you and silences you and censors you and says you're lying when you're not. What's going to happen here, really important, you understand what's going to happen. A lot of good, well-meaning, well-intentioned Americans are going to go down the rabbit hole to future QAnon-style conspiracies, and they're going to go to very dark places. Because people want to find the truth. So they will, with their own confirmation biases, their own presumptions, they'll go find people who think like them and sound like them, who look real, who look good, who are as big a liars as the MSNBC New York Times crowd is. But because they believe what they're hearing, it confirms their biases, they're going to embrace it. And those people will send them to very dark places too. We've seen this with the QAnon stuff. People go in search of truth and oftentimes find what sounds true on the internet and is not. I mean, the story of the 21st century, if anything, is the new rise of conspiracy theories as people abandon the mainstream media, go look in search of truth, and they find the charlatans. They find the frauds with well-produced videos. It looks like it's true. They put a lot of time into it. It must be true. Confirms my biases, confirms what I think, doesn't challenge you. But then the media is not challenging you either. They're ridiculing you. They're censoring you. They're bullying you. Where do we go for real truth? Where do we go for the truth? Where do we go for programming that doesn't confirm our biases and tell us what we already think is true, but actually gives us the real truth in such a way that we can make up our mind for ourselves, that we can, here are all of the facts, the ones you like and the ones you don't, as opposed to narrative shaping, as opposed to framing. I don't want a press corps that frames a story for me or gives me a narrative. I just want the truth. And they're not giving us the truth. They're trying to shape a truth, their truth, and trying to get you to believe it. And you know it's not true. There's a voice in the back of your head that says, wait a second, this is too good to be true. Look at the New York Times story on the Russian bounty. I talked about it on this very radio program and said it just sounds too good to be true. Give it time to see how it plays out. And sure enough, within a week, the Trump administration was pushing back hard. The head of intelligence was pushing back hard. The Defense Department was pushing back hard. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were pushing back against it. And yet the media doubled down. Well, how can we believe the Trump administration? They're just a bunch of liars. The very generals they praised were suddenly liars for pushing back on the story the media wanted so desperately to be true. There's got to be truth out there. There is objective truth out there. We live in a postmodern world where in postmodernism, for years it took me, what the hell do people mean by postmodernism? This is exactly what they mean by postmodernism, that you take the idea of truth and you decide it's subjective, it can't be objective, and therefore we should elevate the doubts as truth over the truth itself. We have all these people going through deconstruction. In churches, it's a big thing now with youth, deconstructing their faith, breaking down their faith, and they elevate the doubt above the truth and ultimately walk away from the faith. People are deconstructing the media, and the media gives them so much ammo, so much evidence, so much opportunity to deconstruct what's going on because the media itself doesn't believe in truth anymore. The media believes in storytelling that they can elevate their side of the story. They can pick the villain. They can pick the protagonist and the antagonist is always the white male Christian or the cop or the conservative or the Republican or the soldier. And everything is them versus us versus them versus somebody as opposed to who, what, where, when, why, and how. This doesn't end well for any of us. It doesn't end well for me. It doesn't end well for you. Everybody goes chasing down rabbit holes and finding, oh, I saw this on the internet. It must be true. April Fool's is the only day of the year where we act skeptically about stuff we read on the internet. People will play you. The left will play you, but people on the right will play you. They'll all play you. But you got to work hard for the truth because it's really freaking clear at this point. The media has decided they will do all the stuff they claim Donald Trump did to stop a future Donald Trump. They'll be as authoritarian as they said he was because they believe he and his kind are the worst of humanity and must be stopped at all costs. And if that means they must run character assassinations and engage in cancel culture and tell you stories that are lies fueled by Democrats embedded within the government as their sources, they will do it. They will be what they say they hate. They will become all they hold against. They will embrace the values of those they claim to despise for the greater good, the good of protecting you from yourself or protecting what they believe is a pure America from you. They are in on this with the left. They are the left. You can't believe them, but here's the thing. You can't necessarily believe the people on your side either because more and more people on both sides are doing this sort of BS. Call me old-fashioned, but I still think there's got to be a real truth out there, and we've all got an obligation to find it, even if it works against us. We should at least be able to embrace an objective truth. But in the media, oh, no, 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 no. It's all about owning the other side. That's more important than truth.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson.
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson. Y'all, Omaha Steaks has the grilling package of the year for you. You want 12 burgers, so my kid is in soccer. And we could get 12 burgers and have a cookout with his team if we wanted. Because you also get chicken, you get steak, you get pork chops, you even get dessert. I mean, you get 12 burgers for free from Omaha Steaks right now. Such a good package. Here's what you do. You go to omahasteaks.com. You put Georgia in the search bar, and you'll see the Let's Go Grill package. You'll get burgers, 12 of them for free. It's almost 4 pounds of burgers. You will get it for free. You'll get steak, you'll get chicken, you get their grilled chicken breasts. I eat those all the time. But the burgers in particular are fantastic. You know, you go to the grocery store, you get your standard ground chuck, and they shrink up on the grill. People tell you use your knuckle, put a little hole in it, like a depression, a dimple in the middle of the burger to keep them from shrinking up so much. It does work, but then you get these kind of ballooned up burgers. You don't get that with the Omaha Steak Burger because they're a burger blend and they're delicious. I'm telling you. And they're going to send you some of their signature seasoning, which is great. Go to omahasteaks.com, put Georgia in the search bar. Get this incredible package. You know, you get $20 off your first order. You get an incredible discount already on this package. And you get 12 burgers for free for a family grill out. omahasteaks.com, Georgia in the search bar. All right. You know all about the anti-Asian hate now, don't you? The anti-Asian hate. There was the video in San Francisco of an elderly Asian man who was assaulted by Dwayne Grayson. He attacked the elderly Asian man. It went viral. The elderly Asian man was robbed and assaulted while collecting recyclables. National outrage over anti-Asian violence, or at least supposedly, you know, we've got all the hand-wringing over anti-Asian violence in the press. They've decided now not to prosecute the 20-year-old. Dwayne Grayson is even heard saying, "I hate Asians." But the district attorney, Chiza Boudin, he's the, what's his, like the godchild or whatever of Bill Ayers, the Weather Underground guy. He was funded by George Soros. He is far left, far left. And he's dropped charges on Dwayne Grayson. He's going to send him through a city justice program. That's right, a city justice program. I thought Asian violence and Asian hate was something we needed to stamp out, and now they're dropping charges against the guy because the left-wing progressive, remember, left-wing progressive, neo-Marxist, critical theorists, they're the real racists here. They're the real racists. They define everybody by their skin color. And you gotta follow your skin color. That's what the racists of the critical theorists on the left want. Just like the alt-right, the white nationalists, the critical theorists, they're kissing cousins. It's kind of like the Nazis and the communists were kissing cousins. Nazism is National Socialism. Nationalism and socialism combined. Oh, but they're far right. No. The socialists, the communists, the Nazis, they're all kissing cousins. You're not supposed to say that because, of course, the communists beat the Nazis and then rewrote history to make it sound like the Nazis weren't communists. They were socialists too. That's why when you get to on the far left end of the spectrum, it's a full circle. And the far left and the alt-right white nationalist crowd, they're the same people, different rhetoric. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson. Delighted to have you with me today. It is 6 after the hour. Let's get going. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Get me on social media at EW Erickson. You can go to ewerickson.com as well every day. Get show notes, get recipes, find out where I am, listen to the live stream, all that stuff. Yeah, by the way, my thanks for those of you listening in Tyler, Texas, putting up with me this week. I'm delighted to be there, and I hope I have kept you company this week on the radio in Tyler. Now, we got to move on to all the other stuff that I wanted to get to in the last hour and did not. Packing the courts. That's right. The Democrats, they've produced this legislation, and, you know, poor old Hank Johnson. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to make Hank Johnson the front man for packing the Supreme Court. Has anyone told him it might tip over if you put more people in the Supreme Court? Hank Johnson is the Georgia congressman who, in a question with a Navy admiral, was concerned that if you put too many people on Guam, since it's an island, it could tip over. Oh, I'm not making that up.
And about 24 miles, if I recall, long. So 24 miles long, about 7 miles wide at the least widest place on the island, and about 12 miles wide on the widest part of the island. And I don't know how many square miles that is. Do you happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that. The Guam population, I think, currently about 175,000, and again, with 8,000 Marines and their families, it's an addition of about 25,000 more into the population.
The whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that.
A member of Congress. Now, if you think that's bad, just consider he replaced Cynthia McKinney. Remember her, that idiot? Yes, Hank Johnson was afraid if you added more people to Guam, it could capsize. It could tip over. The admiral deserved another medal for sitting through that with a straight face. This is a member of Congress who believed the island would tip over if you added too many more people to it. He's now the voice of House Democrats wanting to pack the Supreme Court. Has anybody suggested to him that if you add more members, it could tip the court over?
The real outlier is the fact that the court hasn't changed while the rest of the federal government has grown, keeping pace with the growth of the nation. Many of the earlier changes in the number of justices were made specifically in response to national growth. In 1807, for example, a Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals was added when Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio were added to the Union, and a new justice was added to the Supreme Court, bringing the total number of justices to 7. But this natural expansion stopped after the Civil War, leaving us today with the historical oddity of 13 circuit courts of appeal and only 9 justices. I believe it's time to go back to this tradition and have at least 13 justices. With 13 justices, each justice would be able to have responsibility for emergency applications for a single circuit instead of the current status quo where one justice covers 3 circuits, 2 justices cover 2, and the remaining 6 justices cover 1.
Okie dokie. We settled on the 9 justices of the Supreme Court in the mid-1800s, where it has stayed. You got to love the logic of these people. You add more people to an island, it's going to tip over. You add more people to the Supreme Court. Oh, yeah, it's just fine. This is where they're headed. I want to play you a clip by Nancy Pelosi. By the way, you should understand, and we're all doubtful about the polling these days, but if ever there was a poll to pay attention to, it's the fact that it is really, really bad for the Democrats to pack the Supreme Court. No, there's lots of polling out there on this. Notice the media doesn't cover it because the polling is really bad for the Democrats on the idea of packing the Supreme Court. Even Democrats are opposed. The wokes love it. Here's, before I play Pelosi, because there's a point to make about Pelosi, this is Justice Breyer again on the issue.
Nor should we be surprised if proposals for structural change of the court become a topic of general public concern. If the public sees judges as politicians in robes, its confidence in the courts and in the rule of law itself can only diminish. Diminishing the court's power, including its power to act as a check on other branches.
That was Justice Breyer yet again opposed to the idea. Now we got to play this Nancy Pelosi clip because you gotta know something that's happening.
Do you support Jerry Nadler's bill to expand the Supreme Court by 4 seats? And would you commit to bringing that bill to the floor?
No. I support the president's commission to study such a proposal. But frankly, I'm not. Right now, we're back. Our members, our committees are working. We're building putting together the infrastructure bill and the rest. I don't know that that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's an idea that should be considered, and I think the president's taken the right approach to have a commission to study such a thing. It's a big step. It's not out of the question. It has been done before.
She's not going to bring it to the floor. All of this bluster, she's not going to bring it to the floor. She says she has no plans to bring it to the floor. Pelosi said Democrats are focused on passing Biden's infrastructure package. She backs the president's commission to study reforms on the Supreme Court. It's not out of the question, she said. It's been done before. The growth of our country, the size of the country, the growth of the challenges in terms of the economy might necessitate such a thing, but I've got no plans to bring it to the floor. Progressives are livid at Nancy Pelosi, even as Jen Psaki of the White House dangles hope.
Can I ask a follow-up on the court packing bill?
Sure.
So the president is not ruling out the possibility of expanding the court, and he has started this process that could lead to those to recommendations to expand the number of seats on the Supreme Court, right? So
I think that's getting a little bit ahead of the process. This is a commission that has officials who are many very progressive, many very conservative, have a range of viewpoints. They're going to look at a number of issues. The size of the court is one of the issues, but there are a number of other issues they'll look at. I'm sure the president will look forward to reviewing that report when it comes to his desk, and then I'm sure it will impact his thinking moving forward. But we don't know what that report will look like, and he obviously can still make the decision about what he supports.
He hasn't taken the idea off the table, so isn't it a fair inference that he is open to the idea of expanding the size of the court?
Well, he's spoken to the issue in the past during the campaign. His position has not changed. However, he believes that it was important to look at a range of issues related to the court, given at times the politicization of the court, and that is what he has asked this commission to do.
Let's just be honest here. Joe Biden is a longtime creature of Washington, D.C. He knows that commissions are where ideas go to die. It's like, so the House is pushing forward with a reparations bill, and the moderating proposal of some of the Democrats is to form a commission. And so the legislation Pelosi has allowed on the floor is to form a commission. Commissions are where the bold ideas of Washington always go to die. What's so interesting here is that Pelosi is a progressive. Nancy Pelosi is a progressive. Nancy Pelosi is on the left. Nancy Pelosi represents one of the most liberal districts in the country. But Pelosi also likes power, and she does remember the last time they stretched out and just tried to grab hold of power and use it. She was relegated to the minority for a number of years, with Paul Ryan becoming Speaker after they rammed through Obamacare. So what she's doing now is she's allowing commissions to study the issues, temper them with time, let things cool down, so she can get back to the business of being in power. Now, the Democrats have a greater propensity than Republicans of using power when they're in charge to advance their agenda, even if it hurts them. But this is Pelosi's last turn. Pelosi is old. She knows it. She's over 80 years old. She would like to hold on to power a little while longer than just this one more term. And it's probably not going to happen. She sees the redistricting on the walls. She knows the progressives can't help themselves. They're back to defunding police now. I don't know if y'all saw this. Joe Scarborough had a heated argument with the head of the DCCC because the DCCC would not denounce the idea of defunding the police. And Joe Scarborough on MSNBC is very adamant that the Democrats are going to hurt themselves if they don't go out and say they're going to defund the police. In an appearance on Morning Joe, Sean Patrick Maloney, the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, was pressed by Scarborough repeatedly about Democratic messaging on the issue of defunding the police. Maloney at the time refused to back down, and Scarborough pushed back. It's not a question my argument is, what are you doing about racial justice? Our party is going to do something. Scarborough pushed back. It's not the question I'm asking. It's the question Republicans will continue to ask. Do Democrats support defunding the police even headed into 2021 and 2022? The answer is no, Maloney responded. Are you asking the question and you're repeating Republican talking points for reasons I don't know? Scarborough reminded him the Democratic message from 2020 became defund the police. I'll tell you why I'm repeating it. Because you all did such a damn poor job of answering that, such a poor job of answering socialism questions, such a poor job of answering cancel culture questions. That's why I'm repeating it. Because if you believe Kevin McCarthy should be Speaker of the House, keep pretending that none of this happened and keep saying the House did a good job in 2020 when they didn't. House Democrats did a poor job. So my question is, are you going into 2022 with your eyes wide open? He responded that the party holds the leadership and can learn from 2020, and said the answer to the question is that Kevin McCarthy is the majority leader and we hold the gavel, Joe. The Democrats are still in denial. Pelosi sees what's going on. I mean, say what you will about Nancy Pelosi, you don't get to be Speaker of the House without understanding politics. And she understands politics. And she understands there's a problem, and that's why she's all of a sudden in favor of commissions. Notice, for the last 20 years, the Democrats haven't been forming commissions. Haven't been forming commissions to study this sort of stuff. Suddenly, they're having to. Why? Because they understand they've got to humor the progressives, but can no longer govern as progressively as the progressives want. Obamacare taught them that lesson, swept them out to power, put the Republicans back in charge. Now they're scared. They saw 2020. They thought they had a big wave coming, and they nearly got wiped out by cancel culture and defund the police. The fact that the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee doesn't realize it, and Nancy Pelosi does, shows they got some serious problems. She knows what's coming. I don't think the rest of them do. She's been there long enough to see it happen. Remember in 1994 when the Republicans took back the House, 40 years the Democrats had held the House of Representatives. Nobody saw it coming. And then it's been really freaking hard to get rid of the Republicans in the majority ever since. And they've got a redistricting wave upon them now. They don't have Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act to stop them. They'll have state court actions in some places, like Pennsylvania, trying to rein in the Republican redistricting. In most states, they won't. In Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida, Republicans will be able to control 90 seats alone in the House of Representatives. The Republicans will be able to control the majority of seats in Congress from a redistricting perspective. All the belly aching about gerrymandering from the Democrats, they're about to gerrymander New York and Maryland to try to pad the score because of what Republicans are going to do in Republican states. They see it coming, and they can't help themselves. They can't stop the wokes. The wokes think that they are culturally dominant, and everyone agrees with them. They're in for a very rude awakening. Voters are getting mad as hell at cancel culture wokes.
News and in-depth analysis.
Hello there. Welcome back. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I got to remind you that it's ERICK. So I was at a restaurant the other night eating, and yeah, why else would you be at a restaurant? I had not had lunch or dinner, was sitting at a bar. people kept coming up and introducing themselves. They were kindly moved me into the kitchen so I could finally finish my meal in peace. But while I was sitting at the bar, the bartender's name was Eric with an E-R-I-C. And then he said, oh, we got two other Erics in here. We got the E-R-I-K and we got the E-R-I-C-H. So we had like the entire plethora of Erics in one location at one time. Clearly a sign of the apocalypse. All of us. The E-R-I-C-H, though. It had to be a German guy. All right. We must roll on. The border wall is becoming a thing. The administration of Joe Biden actually is considering finishing the border wall. Nearly 3 months into office, Joe Biden's administration is using eminent domain to seize land near the southern border, fueling fears the government will continue building one of the most enduring symbols of Donald Trump's presidency, the border wall. This week, the U.S. government seized 6 acres from a family in Hidalgo County, Texas, the result of a Trump-era court case designed to help construct the border wall. The Biden administration never withdrew from or asked to dismiss the case, according to documents and interviews. Administration officials said they didn't do so because they're still in the midst of a review of federal resources used to build the wall. But that review, which was put into place through a proclamation Biden signed on his first day in office, was supposed to be finished by March 20th, and officials have offered no timetable for its completion. I'm very disappointed in Joe Biden. I thought he was a man of his word, but apparently he's not keeping his word. Ronaldo Anzaldúa Cavazo, a member of the family whose land was taken, told Politico. He said, not one more foot of wall and no land forfeitures. We took him at his word. We want him to keep his word. Despite Biden's promise to quickly reverse Trump administration policies, he has yet to act on many of them, from failing to increase the cap on refugees to rescinding a ban on most migrants at the southern border, but fewer issues carry as much symbolic weight as the border wall. And his actions there further threaten to complicate his pledge to offer a kinder, gentler immigration system where everyone is welcome. They can have all the excuses they want, but it's really dicey to look at what they're doing right now. So the person who consults with the White House on immigration policy who's grown frustrated, it's a lot of stuff Trump was doing. Trump completed more than 400 miles of a wall along the southern border before he left office. Now, you know what's really happening here? It's that the media has overwhelmingly realized it can't avoid talking about the disaster at the border, that Biden has made it worse. And so now what they're doing is say, look, he's doing the border wall. He's keeping that Trump policy around. You've got leftist opinion writers in the Washington Post saying, hey, the one thing Trump did is he kept the border from being overwhelmed. So now they got to say, look, Biden's doing the border wall. He's doing the, calm down, people. Stop writing critically. He's doing something. He's embracing the policy they all hated, the border wall. It'll be the Trump border wall, though, not the Biden border wall. He can't rearrange stuff. Trump, it was so iconic with Trump. He's not gonna be able to take credit for the wall. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you wish to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. So every day I sit down, I get up in the morning, I start reading the headlines. I put a lot of stuff in before I go to bed. I get up, the first thing I do is I go through the audio clips of stuff that's buzzing around and make sure I get the clips of stuff I might want to talk about, and then kind of build the news around and outline the show, form a little outline, all the stuff. I always taught when I started filling in for Rush Limbaugh. One of the things that a lot of the guest hosts would do is you kind of write down all the stuff you want to talk about in the order you want to talk about them. And then about an hour before the show, Snerdley would call and you would go through everything with him. So he had an idea of what you were going to talk about to get relevant phone calls and shoo people away, unless it was Friday. And then it was Open Line Friday, so people could call. And then inevitably, to this day, I will go off the outline and talk about stuff that's not in the outline. And I'm going to do that again. Recruitment of candidates matters. So let's take, for example, in Texas, beloved Beto, the skateboarding, F-bomb dropping congressman. The Democrats loved him. They loved him against Ted Cruz. They loved a man with such white privilege. He beat out a Hispanic Democrat and got into Congress, and they loved him. The man of white privilege whose father was able to get him out of a DUI, they loved him. What was it, a hit and run, something like that? They loved him when he ran against Ted Cruz, and then he had the audacity to get into the Democratic primary for president, and suddenly they turned on him. He wasn't a great candidate. On and on it goes. Remember Valerie Jarrett, the supposed spy? She ran some awesome commercial. Or there was Sandra Fluck. Remember Sandra Fluck? That's not funny. Shouldn't bring that one up. She ran for Congress. Valerie Jarrett ran for Congress. All the celebrity Democrats, they run for Congress and they fall on their face. The left goes gaga for some of them. They fall on their face. People on the right do this too. They gravitate towards candidates who turn out to be just general idiots. And the Trump supporters out there are in payback mode, understandably so in some cases, and they're trying to find candidates within Republican primaries to run against people who maybe voted against Trump. Look at the pressure against Liz Cheney, who's probably going to win re-election in Wyoming. Matt Gaetz helped screw that up for the Trump campaign. All the people rallying around Matt Gaetz, and now they're suddenly signed. By the way, that is one reason why I treat as credible the allegations against Matt Gaetz. The fact that nobody on the Republican side, including the Trump team, the Trump family, none of them are saying anything nice about Matt Gaetz. That's a pretty big freaking red flag. There's a there that they're not defending him. But in Georgia, one of the things that the Trump supporters are doing is they're mad as hell at all the state Republicans. They blame them for losing Georgia. Georgia was not stolen, contrary to what people claim. The Dominion voter system machines were not hacking the vote and throwing it away. There was a statewide recount. The hand ballots matched the machines. In fact, the machines were more accurate than the hand count. But there's this anger over what happened in Georgia. So the lieutenant governor, Jeff Duncan, is not going to run again. Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, he's already got challengers coming after him. He may not run again. The one person who is going to run again is Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. And the Republican Trump supporters, they found a candidate to run against him, Vernon Jones. You may recall, wherever you are in the nation, Vernon Jones was the black Democrat state legislator in Georgia who the Democrats disowned for backing Donald Trump. He now wants to run for governor. Years ago, he started bragging that one day he would run for governor. Now he is. He's running as a Republican, not a Democrat. Vernon Jones, well, he's got a lot of baggage that these president supporters probably should have known about, including one big issue that maybe they weren't aware of at the time. Democrats have vowed to use the vote to defeat Republicans in 2020. State Representative Vernon Jones, a Democrat from Lithonia, said enough Republicans might lose to shift power in the state house. If your members vote for this bill in 2020, your party loses, Jones said. There's going to be a new Speaker of the House here. If there's a new Speaker of the House, many in your party will lose power. All of you will lose your chairmanships. If you all lose based on this bill, this body is going to change over. What piece of legislation was Vernon Jones opposed to? What piece of legislation did Vernon Jones think would be bad for Republicans? What piece of legislation did Vernon Jones think would hurt the Republican Party enough to hand it to the Democrats? The fetal heartbeat legislation. The pro-life legislation that would ban abortion when a fetal heartbeat is detected. Vernon Jones, who is the Trump supporters' candidate for the Republican Party in Georgia, is pro-abortion. Now, last week, he came out with a statement that he believes life begins at conception and is pro-life. Just a year ago, he supported pro-abortionists and rallied with Planned Parenthood to stop the most pro-life piece of legislation to ever pass the Georgia legislature. We see this pattern around the country of opportunists, and a lot of people don't recognize, or they lack discernment to be able to discern the candidates. They get so enraged and so emotional that so-and-so spited them that they're going to go back somebody who's actually a terrible candidate with a lot of baggage. In Georgia, we're seeing that. But you've seen this around the country. This rush to back people because you've got an emotional response against the other side. You got to have some level of discernment here. You will notice President Trump has not come out aggressively for Vernon Jones. He's not endorsed him yet. The announcement only made. I will be surprised, actually, if Donald Trump comes out and endorses him. But around the country, if the Trump supporters out there want to find people, they need to find good candidates without a lot of baggage. And there are plenty to find. There are plenty of pro-Trump candidates you can find to run in primaries, but you got to win the primary too. And a lot of people, they're just not engaged enough politically. They're not astute enough to how to win these primaries. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. He's running for a seat. Let me explain this to you. I've done this before. Let me just do very basic campaigning 101. Let's say you're running for, mayor. You want to run for mayor. Wherever you live in the United States, and you're listening to me right now, you want to run. Actually, you know what? Forget that. Let's make it even easier. You want to run for a council seat on your county commission. Let's say you want to do that. You want to run for a county commission seat on your county. Now, if you're new to politics, what do you think you need to do? I bet you think you need to go knock on people's doors, and you would be right. The question is, whose doors do you knock on? Because you could be knocking on a Democrat's door, and you're a Republican, and you can make them mad and make them want to go vote for you. Or, even worse than that, you could be knocking on the door of someone who isn't registered to vote. What you got to do is from your Secretary of State in your state, whether you're listening in Oregon or Missouri or Texas or Georgia or Iowa or Florida, your Secretary of State maintains a voter file. And that voter file can tell you who lives in each house and whether they vote. Now, it can't tell you whether they're Republican or Democrat, but it can tell you if they vote. It can tell you if they vote in Republican primaries or Democratic primaries. Because you got to choose a ballot. When you go into the primary, you got to say, I want the Republican ballot or I want the Democratic ballot. And they log that. So they can't tell you who they vote for. But if they're going into primaries, and every primary they're going into a Republican primary, you know that person's a Republican. And if you're a Republican and you're running against a Democrat, the odds are they're going to vote for you. So you want to knock on that guy's door. You don't want to knock on the Democrat's door. You sure as heck don't want to knock on the door of the guy who's never going to vote. You're wasting your time. But also, there's a thing, it's called down ballot fall off. You're running for county commission, which means you're at the bottom of the ballot, not the top, which means a lot of people who vote for president or senator or governor or statewide offices, they're going to get to county commission and they're going to be done voting. Well, I voted for all the people who count. They're not going to vote for you. So at the top of the ballot, you may, from your area, may generate 10,000 votes. And by the time it gets down to the county commission race that you're in, only 5,000 people have hung around to vote. A 50% fall off. So you got to find the people who vote, and also you got to find how many people actually vote for mayor, or for county commission. So you got to go to your local board of elections, and you got to say, give me the list of precincts in my county and the population of those precincts and the percentage, and then you got to go through and you got to find, okay, the last time this county commission seat was up for a vote, how many people actually voted in each of these precincts? So you can find, well, there are 1,000 people in this precinct, but only 750 votes were cast in the county commission race. Well, then you know that if you got 750 people who voted in the county commission race, if you can find 400 people, knock on the doors of that precinct and find 400 people to say they'll vote for you, you're going to win that precinct. It's data. It's data. You got to use the data. But then there's something else you got to do. A buddy of mine texted me. I was going to get to this point, I promise. You can't just knock on doors and say, hey, I'm Erick Erickson. I'm running for county commission seat 1. You got to give them, 1, an excuse to vote for you, but 2, you got to give them an excuse to fire the other guy. What's your excuse? Why are you running? Yeah, I'm running because Billy Bob didn't vote. He voted to put in driver's license cameras. It's an invasion of privacy. And if you put me there, I'll get rid of the driver's license cameras that are taking pictures of you at stoplights. A lot of people are pissed off at those stoplights. I don't blame them. I hate the red light cameras. They should be banned in every state. So you make that an issue. You vote for me, I'll ban those cameras Billy Bob put in. You vote for me, I'll build the highway he's dragging his feet on. You vote for me, I'll make sure we rezone so those big box stores don't sprout up next to your neighborhood. He's in the tank for big business. You knock on the doors of the people you know are going to vote. You knock on the doors of the people who are Republicans. Better yet, you phone bank them first to find out what issue they care about locally. You can probably win. But a lot of people think, and this is the problem, and this is where I'm headed with this, with, for example, the Trump supporters wanting to settle scores in primaries. They think that they can just jump in and say, I'm running against this person because they're bad. They don't support my guy, so I don't support them. And that's going to get you some votes. That's going to get you some votes, but it's not going to get you enough. And there's a problem. There's another problem. Let's say you're the dog that actually catches the car. What do you do when you catch the car? You beat the SOB you hate because you ran against the guy who wasn't sufficiently loyal to Trump. You beat him in the primary. Now you're the candidate. You're the nominee. What do? You've got to give people a reason to vote for you. You can't just vote against the other person. I've told this story before. It's worth telling again. When I was at CNN, I got to know Paul Begala, who was a Clinton strategist. He's a Democrat partisan. It was kind of funny growing up. He was the bad guy. He was the bad guy. We disagree on everything, but I get along perfectly fine with him. He actually told me a great, very illustrative story of this. When Clinton was running in 96, Ann Richards, who had been the governor of Texas, she was beaten by George W. Bush. She called Bill Clinton and said, Bill, you're going to lose. She's the woman who poor George, he was born with a silver foot in his mouth. She's a darling of the left. I mean, she's been dead for years, and she's like the saint for left-wing politics. Her daughter ran Planned Parenthood. But Ann Richards told Bill Clinton in the 90s he was going to lose because he was so focused on what he had done, he ignored what he was going to do. When you run for office, you got to tell people what you're going to do. You know, one of the reasons Republicans lost the runoff in Georgia was because Republicans so internalized that the Democrats were going to steal it. 400, gosh, now I forget the number, 450,000, 205, something like that. Republicans, 427,205 Republicans didn't show up. John Ossoff in Georgia, the new senator from Georgia, beat the incumbent David Perdue by 52,000 votes. 427,205 Republicans refused to show up. 3/4 of them said they weren't going to show up because it was going to be stolen anyway. Well, had that 4/4 of them shown up, David Perdue would have won. The Republicans would have kept the Senate. Do you know why they didn't show up? They said that Perdue hadn't given them a compelling reason to vote for him. It was all about anti-Ossoff. Well, if you knew Ossoff, you would understand why you wanted to be anti-Ossoff. We'll get to see him for 6 years now because 427,000 Republicans gave up and didn't go vote. But 1/4 of them, they just wanted a reason to go vote. You got to give people a reason to vote for you. You can't just say, well, I'm going to run against that guy because he's an SOB. And you should vote for me because you should be anti-him. Well, people want to be for you. And if you get people to vote for you, give them a reason other than I'm going to defeat that guy. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Tell them what X is, Y is, and Z is. They'll probably go for you. But you got to give them the excuse. And too often right now in our politics, people are like, I hate that guy. I'm going to beat him. I hate him. He didn't stand with me. He didn't stand with my guy. I'm going to beat him. You're going to. Well, some people will do that. A good portion of people will do that. But it probably isn't enough. You identify the voters. You identify who you need to reach out to. You identify a message. And part of that message is, why me, not him? And it can't just be because that guy's a jerk. It's got to be something positive. People want some hopeful message that you're going to do something good for them. So if you can give them that and not just say, well, that guy was disloyal to my guy, so I'm going to run against him, you might just win. But the campaign fundamentals matter. Identify the voters who are going to vote. Identify the ones you think you can persuade. Make contact with them and give them a pro-you message. And in being pro-you makes the case they need to fire the other guy. Don't make it all about the other guy. Show that you're going to be better. And if you do that, you may just win. That's how politics actually works. That's why so many people who get pissed off and want to run because they hate the other side lose, because they're just not giving people a reason to actually vote for them.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Have y'all seen this video? This is making its way around social media. It's a Nest camera, or no, it's a Vivint home camera system. So this guy, he's carrying food. I don't quite understand exactly what's going on here. He's carrying food somewhere, and his wife, she gets attacked by a bobcat. She's carrying an animal. I'm doing. Yep, she a bobcat. Where did this bobcat come from? She's between two cars. She's got a cat in a carrier. And, oh my gosh, a bobcat comes up behind her and tries to get into the cat carrier. The husband pulls the bobcat off the way. He's literally having a fist fight with the bobcat. He's in the yard. Oh, he threw the bobcat. Body slammed the bobcat. And now he's pulled out his gun. He's chasing the bobcat in a neighborhood. This is incredible. This is like 46 seconds of madness, this thing. So his wife comes out. She's got a cat in a cat carrier. I don't know where she's going with the cat. He's trying to put a cake or something in the back of his car, opens the car door. Here, he's unlocking the car. He's got the cake. He's putting the cake in the back seat. Here comes the wife. She's got the car. She screams. Here comes a bobcat charging her, trying to climb up her back. He goes over, grabs the bobcat off his wife's back, is in a fist fight. The bobcat's reaching out, trying to claw his face. He's got it at arm's length, shaking it, throws it, body slams the bobcat. Oh, the bobcat charges and now takes off under the car after he pulls out his gun. This is incredible. This is making the rounds all over the internet. I mean, this is the home camera security systems that live stream on the web now give us some of the greatest play-by-play in America. Have y'all seen the one with the snake? Where the security camera alarm goes off and you see the snake come down and wrap up around it. It's incredible. This modern age of live streaming your webcams at home is just crazy. Of course, occasionally up in Canada, yet another person pulled a Tubin and sat down. It was a member of parliament, sat down naked. We say, for those of you not in the South, we say naked. For those of us in the South, he was naked on camera, member of parliament, live streamed on Zoom for everyone to see in all of his glory. Good gracious. When will people learn to just put tape over the camera? Did Jeffrey Toobin teach us nothing? 15. All right. We'll be there's Bobcat. I'm amazed. I'm going to retweet it. You can follow me on Twitter, EW Erickson, and see it. It was rabid. The bobcat on the video. Rabid bobcat. The man's name with the gun was Happy. And he, quote, shot that effer. Hey, welcome. It's Erick Erickson. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, at the end of the last hour, there's this video circulating of this woman. She's got her cat in a cat carrier. Her husband's carrying a cake. And a bobcat comes up and attacks the woman, starts climbing up her back. Her husband wrestles the bobcat off of her, gets into a fist fight with the bobcat, throws it, whips his gun out, and shoots it. Well, it runs, and he chases after it and shoots it. Turns out it was rabid bobcat. Amazing video. I just retweeted it on Twitter at EW Erickson. It's impressive. But so if you're listening in Texas, the Texas House just passed constitutional carry, meaning carry a gun without a concealed carry permit. And this is another example of why everyone should be able to carry. When the rabid bobcat attacks, you want to be like Happy and have your Glock at the ready to kill the bobcat. Every state should have constitutional carry. Georgia was considering it and then yanked it at the last minute after the spa shooting. 20 states have it. I don't know if the Texas Senate will pass it or not. Hopefully they will. But every state should have constitutional carry. All right. So I was going to get into this Josh Rogan, not Joe Rogan, Josh Rogan story. He was interviewed by Megyn Kelly. He has it a book. Josh Rogan is not a nobody. Josh Rogan is a respected columnist at the Washington Post. And to get there, I think I'm going to start with a phone call. I'm going to go to Mitchell first. Mitchell, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure. You there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Eric. I'm here.
Yeah, sure. All right. So what's going on?
So my question was, in the coverage of, and I haven't heard much of it lately, but when they're trying to find out the origins of COVID-19, why do we never hear the news media mention that before COVID-19 was a thing, the democracy was something that the Chinese people were demanding, the riots they were having in the streets, the protests they were having in the streets, and there was nothing that government could do to quell those folks from fighting for democracy. And then this virus comes out that forces everyone to stay at home. And we hear about bats, and we hear about labs, and we hear about this and that. Is there, I mean, maybe I sound like a conspiracist, but I mean.
Well, you sound like a conspiracist, but sometimes the conspiracies are true.
So is there any, like, have you, or I haven't heard anyone mention this, but it's something that I thought about from the moment coronavirus started. My first thought in my head was last year was the Chinese government has figured out how to shut these people down, because it was the only thing that shut it down. And you haven't heard one word of those protests since coming out.
Well, not only have you not heard one word, but while everybody was under lockdown, the Chinese changed the law in Hong Kong and now can arrest them and shut them up. Listen, I wouldn't put anything past the Chinese. I really wouldn't. No one has tied that connection together, I think, in the media. Now, there's been speculation. No one in the media has any evidence of it. What they have a growing body of evidence of, though, Mitchell, is that it was a release from this lab in Wuhan, China. So gain-of-function research. Let's talk about gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function is a study that it's not just virologists, but a lot of virologists do. And it is the study of making a pathogen stronger. It can be dangerous research. You want to find out how do you amp up the role of a pathogen? How do you advance a pathogen? How do you give it some gain of function? You know who the world's leading authority on gain of function research is, according to Josh Rogan, respected Washington Post columnist, guy you might have heard of, named Anthony Fauci. Well, Fauci controls funding for the NIH and the NIAID, and a lot of people are worried about gain of function, and they're worried about speaking out because they're worried about Dr. Fauci. This is from Mediaite. Gain of function research focuses on artificially enhancing the transmissibility of pathogens. In the 5 years prior to the coronavirus pandemic, that research was spearheaded in China by the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which Dr. Fauci has headed since 1984, oversees funding for most of the related research in America. The agency falls under the National Institutes of Health, Rogan referenced. The head of funding, the head of the entire field is Anthony Fauci, Rogan said. He's the godfather of gain of function research as we know it. That, what I said right there, is too hot for TV because people who don't want to think about the fact that our hero of the pandemic might have also been connected to the research that could cause problems. The problem is not that they were doing something wrong or illegal. The problem is that nobody knows what this legal stuff was that was going on. And now, all of a sudden, we have to look at it. There's a growing body of research and data and evidence that China was... Now, listen, there's nothing wrong or sinister about gain of function research. Oftentimes, what you can do with these microbes is you can research gain of function, and you can study how mutations come about, and you can preempt mutations. You can design medicines to stop them. You actually get a great wealth of information by studying gain of function. The problem appears, as Rogan says, that it's very well likely the Chinese were way more aggressive in their research than Fauci or anyone else knew. Fauci was helping fund this sort of stuff, and it appears that the Chinese were way more aggressive than anyone, including Fauci, knew, and yet they were getting money to do this research, which is one reason that the World Health Organization has collaborated with China to cover this stuff up. It is more and more likely that China was researching this stuff and there was an accidental release. Now, remember, when Tom Cotton said this is very much like the Russian story. The media is now walking back the story of the Russian bounty, saying all the stuff they ran with last year to defame Donald Trump. Turns out wasn't true. Not a lot of evidence for it. This is very much the same way with the Wuhan lab situation. Last year, Tom Cotton, U.S. Senator from Arkansas, suggested that there could have been a release from the lab, and the media immediately attacked Tom Cotton. He was racist. He was a bigot. How dare he say these sorts of things? And it turns out there was a World Health Organization cover-up with the Chinese. It turns out, more likely than not, there was an accidental release. Tom Cotton never said it was intentional. Tom Cotton never said it was a plan. Tom Cotton never said it was a strategy. He said it could have been released from. The media pounced. They said he was blaming the Chinese for willfully poisoning their own people. You couldn't put it past a country that runs concentration camps to do that, though. Maybe it was to silence the protests in Hong Kong. But it was more likely than not an accidental release. They were playing with fire, and they made a mistake, and the whole world now has a pandemic because of what the Chinese did. And then they worked with the World Health Organization to cover it up. This is Josh Rogan again talking to Megyn Kelly. The Wuhan Institute of Virology had openly participated in gain-of-function research in partnership with U.S. universities and institutions. But an official told me the U.S. government had evidence the Chinese labs were performing gain-of-function research on a much larger scale than was disclosed, meaning they were taking more risks in more labs than anyone outside China was aware of. This insight, in turn, fed into a lab accident hypothesis in a new and troubling way. Dr. Fauci, the hero of the pandemic, might also have had a role in the research that may have caused the pandemic. People can't get it through their heads, but that's the reality. We don't have a media environment where we can have this kind of discussion. He's right, we don't. Fauci is the patron saint. Now, I will tell you, I have tended over the last year to give Fauci some level of the benefit of the doubt at the beginning because there was so much about the virus we don't know. But at this point, we know enough about the virus that we should be able to live our lives and make a risk assessment ourselves. And Fauci still does not wish to do that. He still wishes to tell you how to live your life. And Fauci is now, interestingly enough, having to call out the Biden administration over its COVID guidance and what it's doing at the border.
Dr. Fauci, does this look like social distancing to you that you require when you talk about 6 feet? No. So in these cells, as you just said, they're violating the very guidance that you tell Americans to follow. A restaurant in the United States would be shut down today if they were being run like this. Yet the federal government, the Biden administration, is running this facility. You can see all of these young children who are next to each other 6 inches apart, many without masks, by the way. Does that follow your guidance that you've issued? No. Well, then why would the Biden administration not go and stop this? I think one of the reasons is because President Biden and Vice President Harris won't even go see this for themselves. That's why I keep urging strongly that they go to the border. I'd love for y'all to go to the border to see this so you can at least give recommendations. They're violating every guidance that Americans are required to follow.
They're not following Fauci's guidance. If the Biden administration isn't following his guidance, why should we follow Fauci's guidance? And at some point, Fauci also said yesterday that it wasn't a liberty assessment for him. It's a liberty assessment for a whole lot of people, particularly people who are losing their livelihoods. We've got the vaccine. Now, I've got to say that I am pro-vaccine. I think it's a miracle of modern science. I think you should go get it. And I think the administration has botched the handling of that. They should tell people, go get your vaccine and go live your life. But they're not doing that either. And Fauci's part of all that. And part of this here, listen, Fauci, and you gotta hear me here because I think we've got to be able to nuance here. Dr. Fauci is not a bad person. And I know some of you are angry at him and you blame him. And so you think he's a bad person, but just listen to me for just one moment, please. He is not a bad person. But Dr. Fauci has a narrow field in which he exercises all control. And his field is public health, immunology and viruses and allergies. And he is a global expert. The problem is that the administration, this particular administration now, to an extent, the Trump administration did for a time and then realized what was happening. They allowed a man whose expertise is viruses to control the lives of 350 million people. You can't do that because he doesn't see the forest for the trees. It's not that Dr. Fauci is a bad man. It's that the government was bad for letting him have all say, as opposed to balancing him and his concerns and desires with those involved in economics, those involved in small business, those involved in other aspects of our lives. When you put a guy in charge whose expertise is limited to one area, guess what? All of his advice is going to be about that, with no care in the world about all the other concerns. So he's not a bad guy, but the way he handled it and the presumptive arrogance of we've got to focus on this one thing at the expense of all the other things is bad. And the fact that the media will not let us point out the research that was going on in Wuhan, and in fact that Dr. Fauci played a role in funding it, that's another bad thing. Listen, the research in and of itself is not bad. There's actually a lot of good that can come from that gain-of-function research. But why can't we be told about it? It raises more questions and concerns. The media is so interested in protecting us from ourselves that it actually undermines our ability to protect ourselves. It puts in charge guys like Fauci, the supposed technocrats. And by the way, no government should be run by the technocrats. Every government that decides to be run by the technocrats is a government that ultimately is undone by the people who lose trust in the technocrats because the technocrats don't take risks. The technocrats are afraid to take risks, and the technocrats live with blinders on that where they only see their technocratic expertise. We're a republic with democratic bodies and functions. The people ultimately are supposed to be in charge. But it is the people, not all of us, certainly not you and me, but enough people decided to abdicate their governance of the country to a bunch of bureaucrats. And that needs to be undone. That should be the campaign issue of our lifetime. But even a lot of Republicans aren't picking up on it.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Eric.
Hi there. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I want to tell you about my friends at Eden Pure. They make air purifiers. They make heaters. They make a lot of great stuff for your home, but really the air purifier, the Thunderstorm, is amazing. You hold it in your hand, and it works. It works so well. My son uses it in his room. He swiped mine. I had to get a second one. We used the other one the other night, for example. We fried fish in the house, and we used it to get rid of the odors in the kitchen. He uses his in his room to purify the air because he's got bad allergies, and it takes care of pollen. It takes care of mold. It takes care of bacteria in the air. They're small enough. You put it in a room, and it's good to go. You can put it in your car. It's portable. You can run it off a USB charger. It works great. really works great, and you can get one $10 off their lowest sales price. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. Eden, like the Garden of Eden. EdenPureDeals.com. You'll get $10 off the lowest sale price when you use the code word ERICK at checkout. ERICK. Odor is a big thing for a lot of people in their houses, particularly when in the kitchen when you're cooking up a lot of stuff. Like I like to make curry in the house. We don't actually have a vent system in the kitchen anymore. And of course, my wife and kids, I grew up overseas. I love these smells. And they're like, ugh. Well, the Eden Pure can get rid of those smells in the kitchen. When you're cooking stuff the family doesn't want to smell, it's great. When you got something smelly and that you got mildewy stuff in the house, the Eden Pure works great. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm. Go to EdenPureDeals.com. You'll get $10 off the lowest sales price. Use the code word ERICK, ERICK at checkout. And it is a great product. We are so delighted to have a couple of these in our house now. EdenPureDeals.com. My buddy Chip Roy is a congressman from Texas, and he is introducing a piece of legislation to declare the cartels in Mexico terrorist organizations. And they are. But neither the last administration nor this one took the aggressive step of pushing legislation through Congress to formally declare them terrorist organizations. They need to. Chip Roy, his district stretches from Austin, Texas, down to San Antonio. He's one of my best friends. I've known him for years. He's been on this program a number of times. He is just a hardcore, rock-solid conservative, and he is committed to this issue, that the cartels need to be declared terrorist organizations, and the government, if you declare them terrorist organizations, has extra tools under the law to be able to take care of them. The cartels, I don't know that people realize that Mexico is becoming a failing state. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't mean it pejoratively. Mexico, though, is crumbling. The cartels and the government, there are local communities in Mexico now that have had to take law enforcement in their own hands because they know the government won't help them. The cartels control parts of the country. Bad things can happen to you if you're an American tourist, depending on where you go. People get kidnapped and butchered all the time by the cartels. The cartels are funneling people across the border for money. The Biden administration has plans to pay people to not come here. That's just going to make the cartels richer. The cartels are having to diversify as marijuana is legalized in this country. It impacts their sales. They were the largest importers of marijuana into the United States. Now that you can legally grow it in parts of this country and sell it, it's impacted their sales. So they've diversified into other forms of crime and terror, and they might as well be treated as a terrorist organization. Good for Chip Roy for doing this. I think what we need is a greater appreciation for the fact that Mexico and a good number of countries in Central America are collapsing. And it's the reality. But the wokes don't want you to point it out. They claim you're racist when you point it out. But countries can crumble. And Mexico right now is crumbling. It is causing destabilization at our border. But these other countries have problems as well, which is furthering the problem. It's not a good situation in Mexico, and we need to deal with it. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Y'all, we got to talk about the communists, the Marxists, the Black Lives Matters crowd, because they matter. Unfortunately, yes, they do. They matter. Have you heard about, well, I'm sure you have, because I talked about it. What's her name? The Patrice Cullors. She bought the $1 million mansion in Los Angeles in Topanga County. She went on a Mark Lamont Hill show. Listen to this. Listen, this is her justification for buying her $1 million. And it's not just one property. She and her wife bought multiple properties.
So a critique, though, from the left that would say, if you are
hang on.
a Marxist, if we're talking about a certain kind of radical politic, that extravagant homes of any sort or multiple properties of any sort is itself contradictory to the ideology that you hold. And so it's not about having money per se, but that it's about or about property per se, but it's about there being a potential contradiction between your expressed politics and your lived practice.
By the way, notice well, you can't notice because you can't see, but I can. This video, they're showing a home sale price of $590,000. It was a $1.4 million home she bought, not $590,000.
Sure. And I think that is a critique that is wanting. And I say that because the way that I live my life is in direct support to Black people, including my Black family members, first and foremost. And for so many Black folks who are able to invest in themselves and their community, they choose to invest in their family. And that's what I've chosen to do. I have a child, I have a brother that has severe mental illness that I take care of. I support my mother, and I support many other family members of mine. And so I see my money as not my own. I see it as my family's.
Everybody else in America sees their money the same way. It's for me to take care of my own. She doesn't want you to have it, though. She wants it. The way that I live my life is a direct support to Black people, including my Black family members first and foremost. And for so many Black folks who are able to invest in themselves and their community, they choose to invest in their family, and that's what I've chosen to do. Except she wants the government to tell you how much money you can make. I mean, that's Marxism. Marxism is take from those who have and give to those who have not. And she's saying, hey, I do this. You know, a lot of times, let's take the critique of the early church. So my daughter was laughing the other day in her Bible class in school. The teacher was describing the early church, and my kid said, so they were communists. They shared everything. They shared their homes. They shared their meals. They shared their money. They shared everything. The difference, and you know, a lot of people say, well, look, they were socialists. They were Marxists. They were communists. They did all this communal sharing. That's what the communists want. The difference is the early church did it voluntarily. It was their choice. The state didn't make them. And the Marxists want the state to make everybody do that sort of stuff. It's one thing if it's your choice. Like, I have no objection to Patrice Cullors using her money to buy a multi-million-dollar house and spreading the wealth around herself. But she doesn't want me to be able to do the same. She wants the government to control my life and tell me how much I can make and where it can be distributed. And big businesses are bad, but small businesses have to drive up costs to be able to afford unionization and the like. There's a lot of hypocrisy here by this woman. And she can't see it. The rest of us can't see. This is why I think that the response to the wokes has got to be to show off their hypocrisy and laugh at them. Show off their hypocrisy and laugh at them. And I mean, the left, they've got no sense of humor on this stuff. They got no sense of humor, and we should call them out on it. We should laugh at them. We should point out the hypocrisy. And we should point out when she defends herself and says, well, I'm taking care of my family with my money. we should point out that that's what all the rest of us want to do, and she doesn't want us to do it. It's also coming in the climate change battle as the Democrats want to impose their Marxist Green New Deal on the rest of the country and now declare a climate emergency. Richard Linsden and William Happer have this piece over at National Review. By obligating the United States once more to the Paris Agreement, and by signaling very clearly that climate will be central to its policies, the Biden administration has joined other governments in the crusade against a supposed climate emergency. We use the word crusade advisedly, since the frenzy over climate resembles the medieval crusades against foreign infidel and homegrown heretics. There's even a children's climate crusade. Medieval crusades would chant Deus Vult or God wants it, the ultimate virtue signaling slogan. Few leaders of medieval Europe could resist the temptation to join the crusades. The medieval elite could count on earthly reward to add to their heavenly treasure. The enemies of God paid the bills. Some climate crusaders have invoked the mandate of heaven, and others use language all too reminiscent of millenarianism. But most claim to be following a mandate of science. It's the science telling us to do it. We are both scientists who can attest that the research literature does not support the claim of a climate emergency, nor will there be one. None of the lurid predictions, dangerously accelerating sea level rise, increasingly extreme weather, more deadly forest fires, unprecedented warming, are any more accurate than the fire and brimstone sermons used to stoke fanaticism in medieval crusades. True believers assert that this emergency could be averted only by eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas include water vapor, methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide, a gas released when fossil fuels are burned to power transportation, generate electricity, and are used to manufacture amenities of modern life. So far, climate crusaders have refrained from minimizing water vapor and clouds, which make the largest contribution to greenhouse warming of the earth. Carbon dioxide, demonized as carbon pollution, is an improbable villain. Green plants use the energy of sunlight to manufacture sugar and other organic molecules of life from carbon dioxide and water molecules. A byproduct of photosynthesis is the oxygen of our atmosphere. Each human exhales about 2 pounds of the pollutant carbon dioxide every day. No scientist familiar with radiation transfer denies that more carbon dioxide is likely to cause surface warming. But the warming would be small and benign. In fact, history shows that warming of a few degrees Celsius, which extended growing seasons, have been good for humanity. The golden age of classical Roman civilization occurred during a warm period. Cooling periods, which were accompanied by barbarian invasions, famines, and plague, have been bad. More carbon dioxide will certainly increase the productivity of agriculture and forestry. Over the past century, the Earth has already become noticeably greener as a result of the modest increase of CO2 from about 0.03% to 0.04% of atmospheric models. More CO2 has had a significant contribution to the increased crop yields of the past 50 years as well. No, it's not. Haven't you heard it's Monsanto and the genetic manipulation? At least that's what the left says. It's by faith. On and on this article goes, but the basic point is that there is no climate emergency. They conclude Americans should not be stampeded into a disastrous climate crusade. The medieval crusades did far more harm than good, destroying the lives of many decent people of all faiths and leaving a bitter legacy that complicates international relations and social harmony to this day. They're not wrong. The problem here is that the wokes wish to control your life by any means necessary. If they can get the Biden administration to declare a climate emergency and use the tools of government, look at what they're doing right now. See, it's not a coincidence we're suddenly talking about a climate emergency the moment a global pandemic starts to wane. They got to find a new way to keep us controlled. Now, they already think they control you and me. They already do. That's why all this idea that they're seeding mythology about COVID and whatnot is a way to control. They already think they control us. And to a degree, they do. But what they don't typically control is the commercial flow of activity in the private sector in the United States. Through a pandemic emergency declaration, they sure have. Shutting down businesses they don't like, churches they don't like. In California, the weed dispensary gets to stay open and the church has to close because marijuana is essential and Jesus is not. So now they need a new emergency as the pandemic begins to fade to be able to control the private sector in ways they otherwise could not. Again, this isn't about you and me. It's all about capitalism. It's always been about capitalism. In the 1980s and the early 1990s, going back to the 70s, the Soviet Union funded communists in this country and around the world to agitate against the United States, write op-eds from think tanks that were funded by the Soviets, to agitate against American foreign policy, to demonize American politicians, to agitate against capitalism. And a lot of people forget that happened. When the Soviet Union collapsed and we could go into the files of the KGB, we found there were mass payments to academics and personalities in this country and to organizations that were designed to undermine capitalism and undermine the United States. And then the Soviet Union collapsed and they had to go somewhere. They became environmentalists. The watermelons of society. They're green on the outside, they're still red on the inside. And what's remarkable is that the Soviet propaganda message of the 70s and 80s against the United States became the propaganda message of the environmentalists. Capitalism is bad. Industry is bad. We've got to regulate. We've got to stamp it out. We've got to punish. We've got to tax. We've got to burden. We've got to slow it down. I mean, my goodness, the Greta Thunbergs of the world and the like, they've been openly talking about how good the pandemic has been for global healing because people have been locked in their homes. They haven't been burning their fossil fuels. The world is healing. The pandemic is Mother Nature's way of healing us. Well, guess what? We've almost beat it back. They got to come up with something else to control us. It's going to be an environmental climate change crisis and emergency. The oceans are rising. The forests are burning. We're all going to die unless we continue to stay home and small businesses continue to be closed unless they want to unionize and then they can open. It's amazing how whether it's the pandemic or global cooling from the 70s or global warming from the 80s and 90s and today, it's always the same solution. Capitalism, bad. Communism, good. Capitalism, bad. We need more socialism. We need a greater social safety net to save the world. And abortion. Got to have abortion in there. Because you know what people do. They emit pollution. They emit carbon. We've all got to go vegan. And we've all got to die to save the planet. We are the villain in the story. Mother Nature is pure as the driven snow. But it's not going to snow anymore. Mother Nature is dying because of us. The communists are just environmentalists now. And the Democratic politicians who in the 80s were enablers of the communists and apologists for the Soviet Union, Bernie freaking Sanders honeymooned in the Soviet Union. It's not a coincidence that today they're the biggest champions of climate emergency. They're the biggest champions of taking on the right. They're the biggest champions of imposing new burdens on all of us the same way they did in the 80s and 90s. That we needed détente with the Soviet Union. We needed to break bread with them, kumbaya. We could learn from them. The bread lines, remember, Bernie Sanders said the bread lines were proof no one in the Soviet Union starved. And now he's gone from defense of the Soviet Union to global warming. We got to do something about it. We got to rebuild not just our physical infrastructure, but our human infrastructure as well.
Everybody in America understands that our infrastructure, our roads and our bridges and our water systems and wastewater plants are falling apart. They need repair. They need to be rebuilt. And in the process, we create millions of good-paying jobs in doing that. I think every Democrat understands that. I suspect every Republican understands that. And on top of that, we can create millions more jobs by transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy and lead the world in fighting climate change. Furthermore, I happen to believe that when you talk about infrastructure, Wolf, you got to be talking about human infrastructure. You have millions of Americans today who cannot afford to send their kids to college, who cannot afford health care, who are working at starvation wages, who cannot afford childcare. We are the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And we've got to rebuild not only our physical infrastructure, but our human infrastructure. And one way that I think we have got to go forward is we have got to strengthen and expand Medicare. Today, Medicare does not cover dental care, does not cover hearing aids, does not cover eyeglasses. And in my view, we have got to understand those are healthcare needs for seniors, and we've got to expand Medicare to do that. And the way we pay for that, Wolf, is by demanding that Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry who are ripping us off outrageously. We pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Government can save $450 billion by negotiating drug prices for Medicare. And that's what we got to do. And with that money, we have to expand Medicare to cover dental, eyeglasses, and hearing.
It's all infrastructure. It's all infrastructure, folks. It's all designed to combat a human crisis, a global warming crisis, a climate change crisis. It's all infrastructure. Every left-wing ideal. The people who defended the Soviet Union now defend all this stuff too. Why? Because the Soviet Union collapsed, and they didn't.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson. A word, if you will, and some of y'all are going to have to humor me here. I've been on this week, at KTBB in Tyler, Texas. I've enjoyed talking to you guys. A number of you have emailed, interacted on social media. You can always follow me at EW Erickson. Hopefully I will be back. But I have thoroughly enjoyed expanding outside my prior footprint as we move this show across the nation slowly but surely. It takes time. We've been building this by ourselves. I don't have a syndicator. I do this show by myself. I have yet to actually really earn income from it. All the ad revenue generated goes to cover the costs. And it's really been a labor of love. I want to do more radio than my local show in Atlanta. And I'm hoping we'll be able to, at some point, just have one big show nationwide. Because, holy moly, I'm exhausted from doing 6 nonstop hours of radio. The moment that this microphone goes quiet for you, it transfers via magic almost by computer to another control room and then goes live for a second show that I do for another 3 hours. I'm getting a little worn out, and I've been doing it now for only about 3 weeks. I love it, though. All of my energy, unfortunately, problem is all of my energy goes into this, and then the moment 3 o'clock hits, I'm just dead to the world, and it's a disservice to my family and my wife and kids to do it. But I gotta say, I took my wife out to dinner last night. There's a little pizza place near us. It's called Ingleside Pizza. And for a year, it has been delivery only. You could go curbside and pick up food and go home. This place has been it's been open since before I was in college. It's the first place. It was the very first place in Georgia I ever engaged in underage drinking, to be honest with you. It's been there ever since. There should be a plaque out front, but we've been getting it to go a lot to support the business, but it's just not the same as when it's fresh out of the oven. It's a very unique pizza, and their breadsticks are marvelous. But I went with my wife. No kids. Our kids have finally gotten to the point we could keep them home. They did not kill each other. No one killed them. It was great. It was the first time I've been out of the house to dinner with my wife in more than a year. She hasn't been able to get out of the house because of her cancer, but now we've both been vaccinated. The pandemic is receding. The restaurant made you wear a mask when you came inside, but you sat at the table. You didn't have to have your mask on. We didn't have kids. It was a normal human existence, just like it was pre-pandemic.
30.
It was glorious. Now, some people have been doing this all along. We haven't been able to because of my wife's and my health situation. But man, a small little morsel of normalcy. Oh, hush up, Siri. It was so fantastic. Life slowly returns to normal, and that's a good thing. You guys in Tyler, Texas, thanks for having me this week. The rest of you, all of you, have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday.